So welcome. This is Point of View for Education, and I've had the hardest time recording this. I don't know why. So I'm not gonna. So I'm gonna try my best and get this through. Okay. Hopefully it'll be short and sweet. So in order, the Department of Education requires for teachers to be certified and for teachers to have certifications and licenses. Within those licenses, you have to be a licensed administrator. You have to have a license to be an administrator with a minimum of a master's, okay? And then, of course, you have specializations. One of the specializations that I got was early childhood. I absolutely loved, and I was a kinder teacher, so I absolutely loved early childhood. The kids are so wonderful, right? They're like sort of like always with their noses, kind of, with their little boogers, and, they kind of have their hands all sort of, dirty all the time. They're very inquisitive. They're very curious. They're funny. They love you. They sort of don't know how to tie their shoelaces, so they're learning that. And then sometimes they put their shoes on backwards, which I absolutely loved. So, so I have an early childhood certification. And so I'm an expert to some degree in early childhood, or I was back then. And so what was very interesting with that is that the disparities in in the child's social economic status is huge, okay? So it's basically double. So what that means is that, and I went back to, get the data because, I haven't been in early childhood for a long time, but what I remember back then reading and what I knew, right, the knowledge and the expertise was that basically a low-income child from a middle class or higher up class of social economic status, which is how the PhDs do their research, was like double in terms of the vocabulary that they knew, okay? So what happens is that if you get a child from a low social economic status, when they go into about kindergarten, they know around 10,000 words, okay, that they can sort of identify and everything. The middle class is 20,000 and upper class is 30. So it jumps about 10, it doubles up, it jumps about 10,000. But then there was another research that I found, and that was by Betty Hart and Todd Risley in 1995 research. And so what they found was absolutely incredible. And they found that there was such a gap in the words that children had heard by the time they were 3 and 4 and going into kindergarten, right? That was astronomical. So the gap between a low social economic student, so that means that their parents are struggling financially, they come from a low economic status, and socially as well. So they have less ability and they have less access to more words and more vocabulary, just because of where they, sort of were born, or the challenges or disparities that their parents have lived or are, or maybe they weren't all that educated or whatever, is 30 million, okay, words. So a child that goes in by that is age 3 to 4 or goes into kindergarten, okay, has a total, if they're middle class and higher class, if they're higher class, then it's much higher, okay, they have heard at least 30 million words more than a lower social economic student, okay? So if you come from humble beginnings, right, in terms of, economics, in terms of money, or even knowledge, right, schooling, your child is going to be at a deficiency of 30 million, or you were at a deficiency of 30 million if it was you. And so it's very hard for schools. Schools are very hard. We get all types, and we have all types of children, because United States educates everyone, okay, 444. I can't stress that enough. Other countries don't, okay? Other countries don't even go up to high school. Once they finish their secondary, which is middle school, they either go to school, and they either go to work, or they go into a four-year college, which most of them cannot afford, or depending on your, on what you were taught in middle school and the pathway that you took, right? Then it determines whether you go to a four-year college or whether you go to a trade school if you pursue it, all right? Because usually the middle schools really focus on sort of trade. We're not like that. We go all the way to high school, and then from there you get to choose if you want to go to community college and you're not all that smart or don't even have all that best grades. It doesn't matter. If they accept you, they accept you. If you can go to college with, with not so decent scores. And so with early childhood teachers, we at kindergarten, right, we accept all students. So you can have a student that comes from a very well-to-do family, lawyers, judges, or doctors, or whatever. So that child is going to have been exposed to 30 million more words than a child who is low socioeconomic. And your middle class children sort of land in between there, right? So they're a little bit more to the higher status, but nonetheless, they're still not at the level that the higher status is. There was this incredible book, and I should have, brought it in, called The Culture of Poverty, that we had to read. And that was such an eye-opening to me, because I didn't understand a lot of things. And so we only understand what we grew up with. And so that gave me a huge perspective on the disparities of how you grew up and what kind of family raised you. Not good or bad, it's just the disparities. And teachers have to adjust with those disparities. You have to sort of bring up the lower economic student, right, that didn't have the facility, or didn't have the educated parents, or didn't have the finances in their growth, in the beginning of their childhood growth, in order to be exposed to so many words, to be exposed to books, to be exposed to vocabulary. So they're starting off kindergarten at a deficiency, while the other ones are starting at a very, incredible level. And so what Title I schools bring, right, what Title I is your funding from the federal government to support those children, to be able to sort of get them, and sort of speed up the process and the accessibility of the challenges that they've had because of the environment and their economic status. And so it's a huge disparity. Can you imagine being at a negative, really, when other people's are like 30 million? I mean, how can you even fathom 30 million? And it's called the 30 million gap, is what the research was called. But we've known it for a while. As an educator, in early childhood, I knew that the disparity was huge in terms of the words that the children knew and could identify once they came into kindergarten. And teachers under the Department of Education are supposed to be able to bring up those children up to par with the discrepancy and with the challenges and the gap of that enormous gap. And they are supposed to be able to perform at the level that middle class and higher class can perform. It's huge. You're talking about possibly 4 years of deficiency compared to the other ones that had that support at home. And so there's a lot of moving parts that go into this, but nonetheless, we educate everybody, and we try as best as we can to really have growth in whatever area, we're teaching, math, reading, whatever, and we need to show growth. And so it's very complicated, and it's very hard, and it's not that easy. And so what the federal government does is that it helps you to be able to sort of bring in some sort of leveling the playing field, and all And so I think I'll leave it at that, okay? So very, very interesting on the disparities of vocabulary. It's always been known in education. It's always been very hard. Teachers that work in Title I schools really do it because they love it, because they love the kids, because they want to make a difference, okay? You know, I don't think teachers get enough credit about the sacrifices that they do. And a lot of people think that we're in it for the 3 months. We work the 3 months. And if you're an educator, you don't get any time off. And if you're, you know, just a snippet, most of any type of events or whatever that my own children had, I never really went to it because I had such huge responsibility for my home school. So anyway, not a, you know, I'm not regretful of that in any way, that there's huge, huge soul that goes into teaching, okay? And I think that people don't understand it, and I think it's very easy to be critical, but there's a lot of moving parts that go into teaching different students because everyone is different, and it's precisely the differences that make us great. Love and light.